Hi, I'm Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions, Body, Mind, and Spirit. Transitions. We all have different transitions in our life. I like to use the metaphor of triathlons, something I've been doing for 12, 13 years. It's the idea that first you start in the swim, and then you get to the transition area, and then you take your goggles off, and then you get on the bicycle, and then you bike. And then you transition again, and then you run. And that is a metaphor for life, doing many things, different parts of our life. And we have a special guest tonight. His life is like a triathlon. Mark Wenner, amazing person, an amazing musician, drummer. He builds studios, recording studios, and is an expert cave diver, explorer, fascinating person, and we'll be lucky to put it all in our show. But welcome, Mark. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Well, a little background. You were raised in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And you mentioned just as a little kid that you also had an attraction to drums. But yet, you saw that TV program, Sea Hunt, and even
Lloyd Bridges.
Lloyd Bridges.
Incredible.
And that dates me. I remember as a child watching Sea Hunt, and that was they did scuba diving, and it was incredible. And how did this morph into your life, both these things?
Well, the water, it was always about water for me. And, years later, I was in Florida diving, and found out that all those shows were shot in Silver Springs, Florida. And they made it look like any place else. But, long story short, it was always about water for me, just a strong attraction to water.
To water.
To the point where I had these dreams where the basement would fill up with water, and I'd be breathing without apparatus my whole childhood.
So that was a dream, thinking about the basement filling up with water, and hey, you can handle it and go through it, and somehow or other that became cave diving too. But also, we have a picture of you with drums.
Yep.
And where did that come out of?
Me and my brother in that particular picture, being that young, and we're holding the instruments that we play to this day. So that was, 55 years ago. Mm-hmm. Amazing that those passions, I think everybody has them, but it was it was depicted in those pictures, kind of a living historical account there.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I think of Minnesota, I think of cold, but yet, even as a child, you were swimming, right? And were you like swimming on a team and everything? Or?
Well, by the time junior high school, mostly I was on a swim team, competitively swimming.
Competitive swimming?
Yeah, I was captain of the swimming team.
Okay.
In junior high school.
Wow.
So, again, always about water. I started a scuba club. What school has a scuba club?
In Minnesota.
Right? and it was well attended. There were 30 or 40 people. I saw a picture of the club the other day, and it was like, and I don't even remember that. That was just so, but people were attracted to the fact scuba diving was just starting to become popular in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. When you think about the history, Jacques Cousteau, the equipment didn't really, that particular tank on the back, regulator in your mouth, that particular type of scuba diving, really, the equipment wasn't until the late 40s, early 50s. So, as a sport that you could get trained to dive, those training agencies didn't exist.
Wow.
Yep.
So you started the scuba club, and you were the head of the swim team. And then where did you scuba in Minnesota? I'm just thinking it's so cold.
My hometown, St. Cloud, Minnesota,
right,
is the granite capital of the world. So it's nothing but granite quarries. So they'll mine quarry granite until they get to the water table, and then they'll keep pumping. But as they're bringing all those blocks out, once they're done, those quarries fill up with water, and it's crystal clear. So we were diving mostly quarries, The rivers were, I lived on the Mississippi River most of my life, and that was terribly murky and not diveable.
Right.
We would ice dive in some of the local lakes during the winter.
And what was ice diving like? What do you see?
It was crazy. I mean, you'd show up, and there'd be a group of Minneapolis divers in dry suits. You know, guys knew what they were doing. They'd have chainsaws with, I mean, the bars, meaning the blade, the chain was like 4 foot long. And they'd go 12 inches deep, break the blocks, build an igloo, right? It was amazing. So this particular, I did it many times, but this particular dive, the ice was 4 feet thick. And they cut a staircase down into the water. As the water, finally when they get down 4 feet deep, they chop through that last bit and it fills up, looks like a sauna, but it's 32-degree water.
Whoa.
And you know, all the cold-blooded fish are moving in slow-mo. Crystal clear. You tie a rope to you, very similar to, this is the type of line that you would use for cave diving, well, it's the type of line that we'd use for ice diving, so we wouldn't stray too far from the hole.
So there you are, diving, even ice diving in Minnesota, but the call of music is happening too. This
all
other
at the same
part
time.
of your life.
Yeah, all at the same time.
So you became a drummer, and were you in band in high school too?
Yep, I was drumming with a band, traveling, flying. Flew out to Los Angeles when I was 14.
When you were 14?
Appeared on ABC TV. There was a kind of like American Idol, but Paul Revere and the Raiders had the show. So I believe it was a Dick Clark production, so we flew out there for that and competed with 3 other bands, which was incredibly exciting. Met, Three Dog Night was on the show with us. They just had their hit one.
Wow.
Beach Boys were on the show.
And there you are with the Beach Boys, and you're 14 years old.
Sitting there eating fried chicken with these monster people.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was.
Wow. And then after high school, I guess your folks expected you to do the college thing, and you kind of went...
Resisted. Hated it.
You tried it.
I did.
And?
I put my foot in the water. I didn't like it.
Okay.
Yeah. Went to Minneapolis, but I wanted to drum. And the band moved to Minneapolis to go to college together, so we got this big old mansion, you know, like a 14-bedroom house in a very bad area of town.
Wow.
And, but I was at the drum shop. I really wouldn't, I'd go to class and then I'd skip class and I'd end up at the drum shop. Great, Dahlgren's Music, Dahlgren's Drum Shop in Minneapolis downtown. And I was meeting the real guys, the real cats, the real players, all beatniks, you know, they were all beatniks. And, but they were the mover shakers in the Minneapolis scene 20 years before Prince.
Wow.
And it really made an impression with me.
And
then back to my hometown and,
St.
you know,
Cloud.
always traveling. I
Right.
mean, I was basically in the back of a van for 10 years, traveling with a band.
And this is playing clubs, and were you writing music at all?
Yeah, we were recording.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a lot of originals. We were constantly recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you made the big move to Los Angeles?
Yep, when I was 21.
21, there you are, the big time.
I was going to go get them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very busy
And
mentally.
tell us about when you got to LA, what was that like?
It was like a dream come true. I mean, you know how the weather is out there and the ocean. There it is, that ocean sitting there. I'd sold all my diving gear.
Oh, you just...
Sold it, just cold turkeyed on it. And the only thing that was in that van was a drum set. And I started playing full time with a group that went out on the road. So we traveled to Oregon, British Columbia, Idaho, ended up in San Francisco on a record deal. Then back to Los Angeles, another record deal. And that's when the music industry, the $500,000 record deals were kind of getting thin. But I was very lucky. I played with Mike McDonald and the Doobie Brothers, recorded on our record.
Yeah.
And, quite a few people, guys from Toto, guys from Bachman Turner Overdrive. We were doing small B-grade movie scores.
Wow.
Yep.
That sounded pretty successful for a young'un coming to Los Angeles. And then, so that was your home for how long?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
And that's where you fell in love, and
Yeah.
You have a beautiful wife to this day, and
Thank you.
have a 26-year-old son now?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
Yeah.
wow, how about that?
Yeah.
Wow, so 20 years in Los Angeles, and it sounded like you kind of gave up the water thing, is that right?
Well, I was on the road in San Francisco, and I remember somebody coming into the club, I think it was the bartender that night, and he said, yeah, we were out diving. And I said, you were out diving today? And he goes, yeah, with whales. And it just clicked.
Whales!
As soon as I heard that, when I went back to Los Angeles, it didn't take very long before I repurchased a set of gear.
Okay.
And I did a lot of boat diving. So out to Catalina, lobster diving, abalone, the Anacapa Island chain, which is off of Santa Barbara. Incredible diving.
So that re-whet your appetite.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, pods of dolphin for miles, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're still doing the music thing, and then somehow things have morphed also because you learned more acoustics and learned to build studios?
Well, I was equally as passionate about building. I love building stuff.
And studios?
When I was young. I mean, I was building boats when I was 14.
You were building boats?
I did. In high school, I built a boat, and I took it down the Mississippi and around the lakes, and, you know, that's... So I always had... My great-grandfather was a Norwegian carpenter, so it was in the blood.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening, the music scene just dwindled down to no budgets for records. I didn't want to play clubs anymore, so there was no money making for it. And I was really lucky. A friend of mine who was engineering Yanni's album in Minneapolis. So Yanni was living in Minneapolis at the time. And my childhood recording studio, Crony, was his engineer. So they moved to Los Angeles to finish up an album, the first album.
And Yanni, to people out there, how would you describe Yanni and his music? He's well known worldwide.
Greek.
He's
that
Greek.
says it all, one word.
Right.
He's Greek. Very, very, so it's a very world music, I would think.
I've seen him on PBS, and he's the big time.
Yeah, I mean, he really was on the cutting edge of new age music.
Okay.
And the record company that was Private Music was his record label at the time. And his producer had a long-standing new age background. He was from Berlin. So when, so I was introduced to Yanni, long story short on that one, and we hit it off. And he goes, I want Mark to contract my studio. I knew nothing about building studios.
You did not know anything about, but he liked you.
My buddy did. My buddy has always been my mentor. So for the last 40 years, Jerry Steckling, who I grew up with in Minnesota, became my acoustic mentor. And he's worked with Lucas and yeah, I mean, he's the
big
top stuff. So we built a wonderful studio in 3 weeks, just 18 hours a day.
In 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
This is in Los Angeles?
Yep. And this producer, owner of the record company, walked in 3 weeks later, because the record company was in New York. And he said, I'm blown away. He came into the backyard and he says, I'm blown away that you guys could do that in 3 weeks. I said, well, thank you. And he said, how many guys do you have working for you in that thick, you know, German accent? And so it was blue eye to blue eye at that point, right? I said, how many people do you need? And he says, so you could build any size project? And I said, yes. And 6 months later, he calls me and he says, I'm going to move the record company to Beverly Hills, and I want you to contract that. So I went from, you know, 2 guys to 13 in about a month.
Wow.
And then I proceeded to build 3 studios for John Tesh, and Leo Kottke was on that label, and Shadowfax, and Ringo Starr.
And Ringo Starr.
The only Beatle that I ever met.
Wow.
Great, funny guy. Not a serious bone in his body. So that was really, those were my Wonder Bread years as far as I was playing full-time. I was going to play with Yanni. Yanni asked me if I would play with him. And
To
I
do
said,
percussion for Yanni.
no, I would be playing drums for him.
Drums, wow.
But Charlie Adams, his drummer, had moved out from Minneapolis, and it was obvious that was going to work. That was going to be musical. But I'd go over to Yanni's house at night, and the two of us would play. Middle of the night, we'd just start recording.
Wow.
So I have some of that stuff. He's going to be in town in February.
Yanni.
Yep.
Ah, cool.
Yep.
Wow. So you ended up a small studio you did in 3 weeks, and then ended up doing huge projects, huge, and this is all in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And then somehow or other you have all this wonderful background, but something called you to Nashville.
Another studio. I had been called to kind of do a tour, build one in Virginia Beach, which I did for a British producer. Then I got called into Nashville. It wasn't as glorious as it sounds, but Nashville was exploding. The music scene in '93 was exploding. I had never seen anything like it, and I lived in Los Angeles. So I got my contractor's license here, and I had mine in California. Immediately, just about the first studio I built was for Alabama, here.
For the group Alabama. That is huge.
They were good guys.
Yeah.
Good guys. They had a publishing company, Maypop Music.
Yeah.
Then Take Six. I did Take Six's studio. Then it, you know, I'm talking now over 15 years. It turned into record companies, Way FM Radio, Nashville Tech, the studio here, and then have been traveling nationally with the company.
And then but you ended up moving here.
Yeah.
You did some projects, and then you got the family and
Within
said
2 years. Yeah, we had that big earthquake in '94. There was a lot of incentive there.
Yeah.
And we had a 4-year-old. We didn't want to put him in that school system, in the Los Angeles school system. So here was the music industry, a Midwestern lifestyle, that small town feel. It was a perfect match. My wife's in the music business heavily. So it was a perfect match. It really was. We really enjoyed it. It's 20 years now.
You've been here 20 years. Wow.
Another life. So
Yes.
20 years there, 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you moved here doing the studio business and doing it kind of worldwide, but the call of the water again.
It's like ping pong.
What happened? You came to Nashville. We don't have an ocean here like LA.
I know, and so therefore when my gear was in the basement, and one of my drywall suppliers, I'd always walk in, he'd have this beet red face. I called him Lobster Boy. Where you been this weekend, Lobster Boy? And he goes, oh, we were diving. We did 3 dives Saturday. We logged this much bottom. He said, you should come with us sometime. As you know, I heard that over and over and over. And finally, he said, we're going to Florida. You should come with us. And so I threw my gear. It looked like Sea Hunt. It was the same vintage as the Sea Hunt stuff. I swear, I look at the pictures now and I go, oh my gosh. But when I saw Ginny Springs, which is in High Springs, so every diver, all the world-renowned divers, I say all, but that place is it's got a worldwide reputation. Northern Florida is the sum total of all that aquifer pouring out of the ground into the Gulf of Mexico. So we're talking about, you know, the hydrology from the Great Lakes all the way through Georgia, and then pouring out in. It's a very complicated set of geology. Let's put it that way. But there's so much exploration there, and so that's where I got trained. I actually hit the water on that particular day with one of the biggest cave explorers in history, Wes Skiles, and he had a light.
Skiles.
You know, and I didn't have a light. He had a light, so I followed this guy, and he had 5 tanks on him.
5 tanks
I've never
going
seen anything
down
like
in a
it.
cave.
I've never seen anything like it. Yeah. he was flying. He flew down a hole that I couldn't swim through with one tank. And I watched his light. I was in 60 feet inside this cave, not what I should have been doing. I wasn't certified for any of that, and I watched him swim. And that blew my mind. It was crystal, just gin clear, aqua blue as his helmet, with him swimming off into this conduit. Blew my mind. So I spent about 4 years training. There's 4 levels of training for cave diving.
Wow.
And it's that back and forth, back to Florida. What are you doing? Okay, I'm doing the apprentice. I'm doing full cave. And I've got about 20 certifications since then.
And all around the exploration and cave diving. And I want to show, can you explain a little bit of this equipment here? And we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want people to know, what is this?
That's pretty short on time. Well, you can see why we wear it. I mean,
You're going down in the caves.
Yeah. So we're scootering also. So
that's a scooter.
Yeah, we're riding propulsion units. So it's easy to hit your head. And the lighting, we're wearing 3 sources of light, sometimes 4, sometimes more. So we're completely immersed in dark, and the only thing that gets us through that is light. So we're very serious about our lighting systems. And our role really, as we get into more of the explorational stuff, is survey work. So we're really mapping. So the caves that we're in Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky. It's all about exploration, and it's all about mapping. So working with scientists, hydrologists, zoologists, geologists, all of those disciplines, and all of the state and federal agencies. And we're always in virgin territory. It's not
virgin, meaning you are the first people to ever be in this underwater cave?
Correct.
That is
not
amazing.
Some of them, all of them. So people will go, do you go places where nobody goes once in a while? And I'm like, no, we go where people haven't gone before every dive.
Have not gone before. Dun, da, da. Wow. That's fabulous. And then you have something called a rebreather.
Rebreathers.
People, I've said that you're going to be on the show with a rebreather, and people want to know, what does that mean?
Well, I can't get into it because we're out of time.
Not yet. We had 5 minutes.
But it's a very, very simple, rebreathers existed before scuba existed. So a rebreather was actually a British-oriented thing. I mean, Cousteau was diving rebreathers before he had developed the tank and regulator. So basically, this is I don't want to get technical, this is a loop. So these have mushroom valves, and when you breathe out, the air goes down this tube, and the other one closes. So it's opposing mushroom valves, and it's allowing the circuit of air to run around in it.
But you're breathing out carbon dioxide.
Well, you're breathing out air that still has enough oxygen in it to survive. In fact, you can breathe your own air. You can put a bag over your head and breathe 3 times, and you've still got 16% oxygen. So you go from 21 to 16% in 3 loops. While all that's happening, there's an absorbent, a lime-based absorbent in here that's scrubbing the CO2, the carbon dioxide, out of the breathing loop. And as all of that's happening, when the oxygen gets low enough, this is squirting pure oxygen into the loop, maintaining that 21%. So this is a specific type of rebreather. This is called a semi-closed oxygen rebreather. And we're wearing other tanks in case this fails.
Right, so you're going down in a cave, and you can be, I mean, it's going to take you a while to get out, which is a very dangerous thing. And for anyone that sees this and goes, wow, I want to learn to cave dive, give me your 60-second spiel on what they need to do.
Well, you need a lot of scuba diving and comfort of being in the water in your blood before you ever even consider the higher levels of diving. Rebreather is probably the top of the food chain as far as diving and its dangers that are involved, because it is mixing your gas. So it's a very slow process to find a good diving instructor, a rebreather that's been tested. So you're being certified on it, and this one hasn't been tested. This is completely a prototype, and
That's
it's completely built for what we're doing in Mammoth Cave up in Kentucky. So
wow.
Our dive team is the only dive team that's diving Mammoth for the past 8 years, and this tool is what we brought in there last Memorial Day. We had 3 of these.
Wow. And so 8 years you've been exploring just Mammoth Cave as it is.
Just Mammoth.
8 years.
Well, it's 400 miles long. It's the longest cave in the world.
400 miles
400
long.
miles, and it's supposed to be 400 more miles somewhere. And the last time we went in there, we found we're in an area that they feel that those extra 400 miles are. So we are just walking on the footsteps of other pioneers that have gone before us, who are no longer with us.
Wow.
Because they're that dedicated.
So you're doing the cave diving still, and you're still building studios, and you are doing a few other projects that's not necessarily music, or is mostly the music thing?
Well, I just try to balance my family life.
The family too,
you know,
right?
Yeah. I mean, diving has been 10 years, well, 40 years, but 10 years of taking away from other things in my life. You know, and some people just are okay with that, but I'm not. I've got a business to run and some acreage that I need to maintain.
And you live in Franklin?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And, you know, I think it takes regrouping from time to time.
Right.
And since I do have multiple passions, like right now my business is slamming like it's never slammed, so I back up on, certainly if you're not diving on a rebreather, you shouldn't be diving at all.
Right.
So
Well, I think it's important for everybody to realize that, you know, this process, your fascinating life, it's kind of been dipping into these amazing skills you have. You can build, and you can go underwater, and you play music too, and that's that passion that's there. And I want to invite you back with your exploratory cave diving team to spend a whole show on just that alone. And I just find it absolutely fascinating that you are doing all the above in such a really cool way.
Well, thank you so much for acknowledging that, because I don't feel special. I just move from situations.
Most people don't do all that.
I know, but we would love to come back. I have some video that if people go, what do you see? If I showed you the video, the next time I'll bring that clip, because we always have those GoPros running, multiple GoPros.
Oh, the GoPros on the...
Yeah, I mean, and if I showed you us scootering in some of these conduits, you would know why we're doing it.
Mark Wenner, thank you for being our guest. We want you back.
My pleasure to be with you again.
And thank you so much. Transitions, body, mind, spirit. Come on back. Good job. Good job.